Hey everyone, I'm Kristen, the Cross Stitching Runner, and welcome to my channel. I want to say a big hello and welcome to all new and returning viewers. And if by chance you've stumbled across this channel is all about cross stitch with a bit of life stuff thrown in. And this is a special episode in the sense that I'm finally doing a spooky September stitching update. And before I really kick into sharing with you all of the projects that I've worked on and the progress that I've made on them, I just want to say a very big thank you to all of the new people who have subscribed to this channel, and especially the people who seem to be very interested in the first episode that I did a couple of weeks ago when I was just kicking off the spooky September slash Spooktober stitching. I was blown away by how many views that particular episode got, and I just want to say a really big thank you to everyone who watched that episode. And if by chance you haven't seen that episode yet, I'll include a link just up here where you'll be able to click on that and it'll take you straight to that episode. With all of that in mind, the premise of the spooky stitching September slash now that we're leading into October, the premise of the stitching that I've done for the majority of September has been the use of a decision-making app wheel, or three wheels really, that has had the first wheel with many of the different projects that I've wanted to work on. The second wheel has had stitching prompts. So if I've not wanted to work on a specific project, but I know that I wanted to do some stitching, I've used the prompts wheel to give me a bit of a hint of a theme that I could work with. And that theme has also helped sometimes when I've not wanted to use the third wheel, which is the spooky media wheel. The spooky media wheel is where I've listed a lot of different movies, TV shows, podcasts, and similar things from various streaming channels such as YouTube or Netflix or anything in between. That has helped a lot. Those three wheels, using a combination of any of those wheels, has been a lot of fun so far. With all of that in mind, let's get into the stitching and sharing with you the progress that I've made, and there's even been a couple of new starts. Just before we really kick into the spooky stitching September update of all the projects that I've worked on so far, I just want to acknowledge the shirt that I'm wearing today. Today is the 28th of September and it is the AFL Grand Final. The Sydney Swans are playing today and they have had a phenomenal year this year. They finished the top of the minor premiership league, ladder, however you want to call it. And what makes today extra special, aside from it being the AFL Grand Final, is that they are playing against the Brisbane Lions. And what makes this super special is that it has been 26 years since two non-Melbourne based teams have played in the AFL Grand Final. This is significant aside from the years. It's significant because the AFL is predominantly Melbourne based. There are at least 10 Melbourne teams that are in the southern state of Australia, in Victoria, and the whole premise of the AFL that we know it as today kicked off in Victoria, in Melbourne, and it was originally known as the VFL, the Victoria Football League, and it then became a national game where many teams are now based in other states aside from Victoria. So this is where it is extra special to have two non-Melbourne based teams. The extra significant thing is that with the Brisbane Lions and the Sydney Swans, their teams did originally start in Victoria. They were known as the Fitzroy or Fitzgrey. This is where I'm getting to be a little bit vague, but Anyway, the point is, these two teams did originally, many hundreds of years ago, maybe 150 years at the most, start off in Victoria, and then as the years changed and the league evolved and the game evolved, the two teams, not Melbourne, there is a team from Melbourne, the Sydney Swans and the Brisbane Lions, those two teams did move obviously out of Victoria to then be based in Queensland and New South Wales to become the two teams that they are today. That is just something I really wanted to acknowledge and celebrate a little bit today, because it is part of the other stitching that I've done throughout this year, where if you have been a long-term viewer of this channel, you will have heard me rabbiting on quite a lot about the AFL and the different projects that I've had associated with that league. So thank you very much for bearing with me on this rambling and excitement and discussion about the shirt that I'm wearing and why today is just that extra bit special. Now we definitely will get into the stitching, and the first project that I want to share with you that has seen at least 3 different days of dedicated stitching, or at least a few hours for 3 different days dedicated to the project, and it is called The Reader. It is based on artwork by Amy Stewart. Not Amy Stewart, sorry. I've got Amy Stewart in the brain because I'm thinking of a different project. But I was thinking of another project that I had come across as part of preparation for this particular episode. What I was looking for, rather, was artwork based by Lisa Parker, and it has been charted by Heaven and Earth Designs. This is roughly what it will look like when it's done, and if you have been with me for a little bit of time, you will have been involved with my journey with umming and ahhing and contemplating what fabric I was going to be working on for this project. And I had initially started on this Easy Guide fabric where it's gridded for 200 by 200 stitches, working out to being roughly 400 stitches per square. And I had started in this top left corner and came to realize that I would be stitching several hundred thousand, or it felt like at least several hundred thousand stitches in DMC 310 before I would even get close to anything remotely interesting for this pattern. So what I had done was thought, okay, I'm going to switch over to some black linen, or black fabric of any kind really, and I had restarted the project on this fabric here. I'd started in the middle, and you can see a little bit of what I've done. This camera may not focus very well on what's happening here, and for much of the muchness, the stitching went well, and then I started to realize that I was stitching myself up to an extent. Stitching myself up in the sense that due to the way linen can be at times, I was not stitching as well as I would like. So to the point where I was going to have to frog parts of it and restitch it, and I was stitching 1/1 on this 28 count linen, and that was going to be something I just didn't want to have to do, let alone try and fudge it and not have it have such a negative impact on the rest of the pattern or project. With all of that in mind, I then jumped back over to the original fabric that I started working on, using, thankfully, these guides that we see on the fabric. I was able to calculate a bit more over to the center of this fabric along the top. And I've started stitching this, doing the 10th stitch. I'm using 3 strands of DMC to give me that coverage that I really feel this needs. And hopefully with this close-up, you'll see that when I was stitching this tent stitch with 2 strands of DMC, there's still a bit of fabric coming through, and if this was not a full coverage project, then I wouldn't be fussed about some of the fabric coming through, especially with how things can be. That said, I am so happy with the decision that I've made to still do tent stitch and using the 3 strands of DMC. And because I'm starting at the top and working my way down, that will hopefully make life a little bit easier for a little bit of the bulkiness that comes with using 3 strands or more, or even 2 or more strands. I am just really happy. I am near the top where we start to see some of the teal colours. So it would be the DMC 500 or 501 and similar shades there. That I'm just super happy with. And I appreciate I'm rambling a bit here. The time has been 3 days or so. I've not kept count of how many stitches I've done. So if anyone here has done at least a part of their projects in tent stitch, you'll know how quickly that can go and how many more stitches you can build up just within a space of a couple of hours, let alone several hours of stitching. The next project that I have to share with you is called His Master's Voice Mini. And again, it's based on artwork by Lisa Parker, charted by Heaven and Earth Designs. And with this particular project, bearing in mind what I've noted about the reader, I have decided to still do the stitching on white fabric. I've chosen to start in the center of the fabric, and this is roughly what the project will look like when it's done. What I've done with the stitching, because I've been able to spend nearly 3 days on this piece as well, I have, as we can see, made quite a lot of progress that I'm super happy with. This has been stitched on 25 count easy grid Zweigart Joberlin even weave. I'm not sure on the exact wording for this one. And what I've been learning so far between these 2 pieces is doing full cross 2/1 has given me the coverage that I want for this piece, which means that when I get round to doing a lot of the black stitching that we see on the edge here, initially I was doing 2 strands over 1 tent stitch and I wasn't getting the coverage that I needed, and I then started doing full cross with 2 strands. That is okay if I'm just wanting to do some really simple stitching and not concentrate too much on what I'm doing. What I'll most likely do for the rest of the background when it is that solid black stitching is do the 3 strands tent stitch, and that should hopefully give me the balance that I need where I'll still get the coverage, but I don't have to spend as much time on the stitches with the full cross. I'm hoping it'll be all right, and with the partial tent stitch that I've done so far, I'll cross that bridge when I get to it. It may mean that just for that particular block, I'll do full cross for that and then the rest will be tent stitch. We'll wait and see. My main focus, however, is the center of this piece and just having fun with the stitching. Now, the next piece that I have to share with you is a new start, and it is from the stitching retreat that I attended, I think nearly a couple of weeks ago now. So let's get set up for that. This new start has taken me by surprise in the sense that I never thought that I would enjoy stitching it as much as I have, to the point where for the last few days I have paused the use of the decision wheel spins of which projects that I'm going to work on each day because I've just enjoyed working on this so much. It is the Black Cat sampler from Just Cross Stitching's 2024 Halloween special, and this is the Black Cat sampler. And as a bit more of a close-up, this is roughly what it will look like when it's done. The pattern has suggested the use of 32 count even weave and stitching it 2/2. In this particular case, I've chosen to stitch this on the Zweigart's 25 count Jobelan type of fabric called Stormy Night, and I've predominantly used cottage garden threads on this piece, with the exception of the cats and the white stitching, which has been the DMC 310 and B5200. I have enjoyed the choices of using some different threads and different colours of the different motifs, so to speak, that are in this. I have decided that if I were to stitch this again, that if it was going to be done on this fabric again, that I would choose some different colours, in the sense that some of the lighter greys that are in the variegated thread are blending in really well with this fabric. I've enjoyed working on this fabric. I also want to note that this is actually printed fabric. So this is the back. You will notice that it is a solid colour, and then when we flip around to here, you'll hopefully see some of the subtle mottling, cloudiness. I'm not sure of the exact words to use here. You'll see what I'm saying, I hope. This fabric I also got from the JK stitching retreat that I attended a couple of weeks ago, and if you want to see all the haul that I got from that retreat and hear a bit about my experiences at my first in-person stitching retreat, click on the link above and you'll get to hear all about it. The next project that another new start that I've done for the spooky September stitching has been the Headless Horseman by Unconventional Cross Stitch, and this is roughly what it will look like when it's done. And I am surprised to an extent by how much I am enjoying working on this, partly because it's a new start and I love new starts because there's this excitement about starting something new and seeing how long it will be before I muck up and need to frog or fudge. So with this particular piece, I have started in the middle and I'm stitching this 2/1 on the Easy Grid fabric, with it being 25 count Easy Guide. This has been a lot of fun and I'm looking forward to making more progress as time goes on. The next progress, or picture project rather, that I have to share with you, both are by Tilton Crafts, and it is Halloween Treats 1 and 2. For anyone who has been with me on this journey for quite some time, you will have heard me talk a bit about my challenge with the Halloween Treats 1 project, where I had started this in the top left corner and found that the cover picture is literally like it is in the chart, in the sense that we're stitching some of the lighter colours in the top left corner or around the edges as well. That was something I had not quite expected. So rather than continuing on working in the top left corner and trying to work diagonally down until I got to the fun stuff, I started in the center of the fabric, and I'm so thankful that I have, because it has helped me realize that I probably wasn't going to get all of the project onto the fabric. So let's get the cover picture sorted out and we'll come back. So this is the cover page for Halloween Treats 1, and you can see on the cover page what I'm referring to about the lighter colours around the edge of this cover page. This was where I hadn't anticipated it being incorporated in the chart. I had hoped that all of the squiggle lines we see around the edge, that would be the start of the piece. Lesson learned, everything's all good. And this is my progress so far. When I've done the progress wheel, not the progress wheel, rather the stitching prompts or the actual projects wheel, this piece has come up twice, and it has made the world a difference for the amount of progress I've been able to make on this piece. I can start to appreciate that I may have to do something creative with the stitching in the top left corner here, because I may get myself into trouble if I leave it as is, but that is future Kristen to worry about. I am stitching this on what appears to be 25 count even weave. I'm really enjoying working on this fabric because, for starters, it's an even weave and I don't have that lumpiness that comes with the linen. I'm stitching this 1/1 using all of the called for colours from DMC. This so far has been a lot of fun, and I think partly because it has been mostly solid stitching and I'm now getting into the confetti parts. Speaking of confetti, the next piece that I have to share with you is the Halloween Treats 2, again by Tilton Crafts. And smart me, when I started this piece, started in the center of the chart, and I'm super thankful that I've done that. This is roughly what it will look like when it's done. And similar to Halloween Treats 1, this particular piece has come up just a couple of times with the wheel spins, and this is where I'm at so far. It has meant that I've been able to finish off majority of the calendar page where we see the numbers 31, and the brownish orange line that we see near the top of the calendar page is a part of where a pumpkin will be. Then underneath the calendar page is where a bit of a banner will be. So with this, there is a lot of confetti, but I think it's well worth it. And with this piece, I had initially started stitching this 2/1 and found that this particular fabric doesn't need it because stitching this 1/1 has plenty of coverage and I'm really happy with it. Shrooms is the next piece that I have to share with you, and it's artwork by John Shannon, charted by Heaven and Earth Designs, and this is roughly what it will look like. I started this piece last year during the October spooky stitching, and I have started stitching this on black even weave. I'm so happy with this decision. I'm stitching it 1/1 using all of the called for fabrics and starting in the center of this piece. Again, I'm super happy with this decision because there is quite a lot of black as the border, and having this on the black means that I might be able to get away with not stitching the black. We'll wait and see. I've got so much other colours, or so many other colours rather, that I have to play with and have fun stitching. So this is the top of a part of the mushroom, and we can start to see a bit of the stem or stalk of the mushroom. I'm not sure of the exact wording for that. Either way, I'm stitching this 1/1 and I'm looking forward to spending more time on this, whether it be this year, next month, next year, who knows, we'll wait and see. Before I move on, I just want to note that I spent a couple of days working on shrooms as part of the stitching wheel that I have for the different projects for the spooky stitching season. Now, the next project that I have to share with you is called The Inner Works of Life, based on artwork by Stephanie Law, charted by Heaven and Earth Designs. And this is roughly what it will look like when it's done. This has been a relaxing joy to work on, and I've spent maybe 2 to 3 days on this, partly because of the spins that have come up, and other times it's because this is what I've just felt like working on. I've started in the center of the fabric, and it is actually going to be a surprisingly large piece. I'm stitching this on 25 count Swigart Easy Grid fabric. These lighter colours, I found myself fudging things just a little bit because many of the light colours are just so close and so similar in shades that in the grander scheme of things, it's not going to make a difference. For most of the stitching for September, I have focused on some of these darker colours up the top here to give me something just a little bit different to work on and to try and show that there is a difference and that I have made some progress on this. What I've loved with this piece also is I am slowly having memories stitched into this based around the movie The Practical Magic. I haven't watched that movie for quite some time, so it was really nice to rewatch it with an older eyes on it, so to speak. I don't remember how long ago it was. It could be nearly 20 years ago, noting that I am a little over 40, so a lot has changed. So either way, I've spent some time on this and I'm really happy with the progress so far. Scaredy Cats is the next piece that I have to share with you, and it's based on artwork by Jeff Haney and charted by Heaven and Earth Designs. This is roughly what it will look like when it's done. And when I first started working on this piece, I actually fell out of love with it pretty quickly. I started in the top left corner. I'm stitching this on 28 count linen, stitching it 1/1 using the called for colours. And where I fell out of love with this is the way it's been charted mostly. So what I've done is that I did start over here. I'm trying to do diagonal a bit to get to where the fun stuff is. I do love the various shades of pinks and purples. Where I'm feeling a bit with is that it's not looking like the cover page at the moment. I do acknowledge that converting artwork into cross-stitch projects and charts is not easy. It's something that I'm still very much learning how to do and how to adjust to make it look the way that I at least think it should. With that in mind, I'm still bearing with it. I have spent at least a couple of days stitching on Scaredy Cats. What I'm smiling and laughing about is when I did put some dedicated time into this, at least 45 minutes, is I watched the episode from Supernatural where Dean is scared shitless of everything. There's something to do with a curse that was placed upon him, and he was scared of everything. Like there might have been a little dog that might be considered to be an ankle biter that is not like your German Shepherd or Doberman or those bigger guard dogs. So Dean would be hoofing it down the street. He'd be running down the street, being like scared of everything. There's even a scene where Sam and Dean have gone into a old abandoned mill and they think that there's something in a locker, a metal locker, and they go to then open it up and there's a cat inside and Dean goes, ah, freaking out, screaming. And this to me is hilarious because these guys, it's their job to go into these places that are abandoned and they know they're going to come across spooky stuff and weird things and all the rest. So if by chance you are a fan of Supernatural, you'll know what I'm talking about. And especially with the end of the episode where there's this bonus scene where Dean is just doing his thing, grooving along to the song Eye of the Tiger. So that's a bit of my feeling to do with Scaredy Cats, but my memory also stitched into it based on one of the Supernatural episodes. Pisces is the next piece that I have to share with you, and I've spent about 2 days or so working on this. And this particular piece is my own design to an extent, where it's a combination of a quote and some artwork that I found online. And I'm not making this publicly available because I'm concerned about copyright, in the sense that I'm not sure who the actual artist is for the artwork. This is roughly what it will look like when it's done, and what drew my attention to this was the artwork and the colours that are in the fish especially. And the words that we see in the centre here that may not be clearly visible, it says Pisces. Not everyone gets the same version of me. One person will tell you I'm a beautiful soul. Another will tell you I'm a cold-hearted arsehole. Believe both. I act accordingly. Now, depending on which day I am looking at this, stitching the quote, or talking about this with all of you, at times I feel like, oh gosh, I feel so embarrassed about this quote. This is too sassy, all the jazz that goes with it. Other days I'm like, nah, bring it on. This is so true. And again, that just comes with the ebbs and flows of the moods that we all have as to how sassy we're feeling, or however else we may be feeling. With this particular piece, I have, for the last couple of days, just worked a little bit around where we see a bit of the fin here. Now, the challenge with this piece, especially since I'm stitching this 2/2 on 28 count even weave, is that I am running out of fabric. I have not allowed enough fabric on the sides, at least for this piece. So it means that I'm still needing to leave a little bit of fabric on the side for framing or whatever it is that I'd like to do. Acknowledging that I could add some extra fabric to the sides. However, I don't think that would be enough for the chart and how much extra stitching would be required on the sides. That said, I think even though a few hundred stitches either side of the piece that's going to be cut off, it's not going to detract too much from the actual piece, because we can see that we'll still get the main themes of what's going on here, and it will be enough to still show the beautiful colours that are in the fish. So everything will be all cool. Now, the last piece that I've spent some time on throughout the month of September to date has been the Moonlit Waters Max Colours artwork by Julie Fain, charted by Heaven and Earth Designs, and this is roughly what it will look like when it's done. And this is where I'm at so far. I'm stitching this on, I think, 28 or 25 count even weave, and I'm having a lot of fun. I've spent most of my time stitching the background where we see the moon, just to really try and bring it across to the section here of the wing, because I have mucked up a little bit with my stitching with some of the wings of the fairy, and I'm wanting to get as much of the surrounds in terms of the moon that is behind the wings as accurate as I can, so I can then properly see where I'm going to be fudging just a little bit more to get things then back on track for when I work on the rest of the body of the fairy. This has been a very slow progress. I am stitching this 1/1 using all of the called for colours, and from a distance this is looking absolutely awesome. And I think for a while there I had hoped that I would actually get this done in the space of 12 months or 1 calendar year. If I was a different kind of stitcher and I was able to, and I can, focus just on one project, I would certainly be able to get this done within a year or very close to that time frame. I'm not that kind of stitcher. especially now, this is flowing very nicely into stitching plans and some of the things that I've actually been watching throughout the month of September today, noting that it is the 28th of September and we still have at least a good half of Saturday and 2 more days before we really get into October. So let's have a bit of a chat about what I've been watching, what I've been listening to, and all that good stuff. From a spooky viewing perspective, I've really enjoyed starting the rewatching of many TV shows and even some oldie but goodie movies as well. I've already mentioned that I watched, or rewatched rather, the movie Practical Magic, and that I've watched some of the episodes from Supernatural back at the very early seasons. And it is just, especially with TV shows, when you have watched the whole series and you start to see the progress of the aging of the characters and or actors even, and the change in the way that they deliver the character's voice and so forth has always been quite fun. And I actively have the TV series Gilmore Girls on rewatch, and I've not really kept count of how many times I've watched that series, but it is always interesting just to see how the actors have changed over time and how the characters have developed as well. So, Supernatural is a great example of that as well, considering it went for 15 years and the actors are now doing different things. So I've also watched The Mummy again, just the first movie with Brendan Fraser, and I love that movie. It has definitely aged a bit with regards to technology advances and the way CGI and special effects and all that jazz that goes with it. But I still love that storyline, and I love that with any of the movies that have followed after it, that you can see that. I think for one of the movies, when they did change one of the lead actors in it, that it just wasn't quite the same. And I'm not going to go or speculate as to the reasons behind all of that, but it's just one of those sort of things when you start off a series or franchise with certain actors playing certain characters that you get used to seeing them in that light, and they do such a great job of it as well. So that was really great watching The Mummy again. I had also started watching the TV show Charmed again, and Charmed in terms of the original from I guess the late 90s to the early 2000s, and that was interesting again from a bit of an acting perspective and also the special effects, CGI, all that jazz, and sort of seeing how all of that has progressed. And I know that there's like a Charm 2.0 with, and I'm not sure if I'd classify it as a remake, but it's certainly just a new series or new take on the original. So it's certainly been interesting looking back at those TV series, because you can definitely date the the TV series and the movies and like with the technology that is actually used in those movies or in those TV series as well, whether it be the mobile phones or the pages and the laptops, computers, and even some of the lingo or jargon that's used for the time as well. So that has been quite interesting to watch. I've also started watching again the TV series Lucifer. That is one of those shows where I definitely need to leave my brain at the door a bit because of the comical nature that's part of it, and a little bit to do with the acting as well. So again, it's one of those sort of fun, lighthearted kind of shows that has been pretty cool. On YouTube, I have continued watching various clips from the channel Amy's Crypt, And if you are into that sort of spooky, paranormal investigating, and even just sort of from a tongue-in-cheek kind of perspective, that I've certainly enjoyed the way that Amy and her husband Jared go and take a look at some different places around the world that are considered to be haunted, and some of the devices that they use to try and confirm or deny whether or not there are spooky entities or paranormal things that are happening there. I've also enjoyed watching the channel called Beardo Get Scared, and Beardo, he's pretty cool in the sense that he does a bit of debunking where some people will, or some channels will reach out to him and say, hey, could you have a look at a particular episode that we've made? Or there'll be other people that will say, oh, look, can you take a look at this particular channel and let us know what you think of it, in terms of whether they, in terms of the creators of some of the episodes or the creators of the channel, are trying to fake paranormal activity in different locations just to try and get views, get likes, and all the jazz. So that's been quite interesting, and it's given me a new appreciation of what people may try and do in terms of faking things to try and make their episodes interesting. Noting that with Amy's Crypt, they do debunk along the way, where they'll go, okay, look, it's raining outside, it's windy, this is where some of the noises that are happening, but because the windows are rattling, or there's no glass in that window, so that's where we're getting some wind come through, or that might be why we're getting goosebumps and such on our skin. So that's the sort of debunking thing where other channels have been known to be having people tapping on windows or tapping on walls, or they'll have a larger crew than they allude to, dressed in black, and will actually be skulking around on other floors, making sounds of footsteps, or they'll be moving furniture around or closing doors when they were open, or vice versa. So that's where I found that component of things quite interesting, and starting to appreciate where I can see things for the entertainment value, but also get a bit of that critical thinking kicking in a bit as well. So there's some of the things that I've enjoyed watching and listening to a little bit as well. When I've gone to the gym a little bit, I've also enjoyed listening to a podcast called Morbid. And with Morbid, it's a podcast where Elena and Ash are talking about a variety of things, ranging from serial killers to talking listener tales where people have written in about some of their weird encounters or spooky encounters and such. And it's a really, really cool channel. And more often than not, the episodes go for a minimum of 60 minutes or so. And they can be just some really great background noise to listen to, if nothing else. So they're just some of the different things that I've watched or listened to and such. And I'll probably continue doing those sorts of things throughout the month of October. Speaking of such, and talking about a little bit about plans and that kind of thing, since I came back from the JK stitching retreat, I have been itching to want to start anything and everything. So, in the sense of wanting to start all the new things that I've purchased from the retreat, and then remembering that I've actually still got quite a lot of kits and charts in my stash that I've had for many years and haven't seen the light of day for quite some time. With this in mind, let's kick into some of the plans for my spooky October stitching. The first piece that I'm really keen to put some work into is Trick or Treat 2, artwork by Randall Spangler, charted by Heaven and Earth Designs. And this is what it will look like roughly when it's done. I've been working on this piece for quite some time, and it it got set aside for a little while when I realized that the actual chart that I'm using, this is my progress so far, stitching this on 18 count pink Ada that I've had in my stash for ages. The chart I purchased off Etsy from a store that no longer exists because they got found out as breaching copyright, noting that copyright is different in many different countries. And I think this particular person got found out that they may have actually stolen some of the artwork and recharted things just a little bit differently, and then was trying to make a profit out of that stealing. So this is why this is going to look a little bit different to the cover page that I'll regularly share with you. That said, I'm wanting to finish the top row. So I'm wanting to finish the little bit of blue stitching that needs to be done near the roof of the house, and then continue along more to the side where I'll need to stitch the moon and the witch that's flying across the moon, and the remaining leaves and tops of the branches that are part of the trees that border or frame rather the house. And this is going to look really cool. I'm actually umming and ahhing a little bit about whether I'll also stitch or fill in rather the shape of the ghost, because the chart calls for some special DMC thread that is the glow in the dark kind of white. And I do have it in my stash, and I'll have to wait and see as to whether I actually do it now or later. We'll wait and see. The good thing is that all of these colours are colour fast, so there'll be no problems with giving this a bit of a wash when it's finished to then frame it up, because this fabric is quite grotty. It is dirty. I've been working on this for quite some time, but it'll be worth it in the end. Now, the next piece that I'm actually keen to start, partly because I forgot about it, but totally fits in with the spooky October vibes and even the spooky September, is Autumn Lane Stitchery's Moons Out, Brooms Out. Now, I've had this in my stash for a while, and it actually got hidden away a bit because of my move to Wollongong and the way that I've got some things stored at the moment. So that said, the cool thing is I know that I've got some 18 count navy blue Aida that would be perfect for that piece. The question will be if I've got enough of the fabric for the chart, because for some odd reason I feel that I've seen somewhere that the suggested fabric with this is to stitch it on, yes, 32 count fabric. So I'll have to use the online fabric calculator to be absolutely sure that I've got enough fabric to do that piece justice. But even though it's been a while since Autumn Lane Stitchery have done a Flosstube episode, because I know they are super, super busy. These guys are absolutely awesome. I'm in absolute admiration of Aaron's artwork, and I know that Cassandra stitches a lot of these cover pages when she can, when she's not busy doing all of the other amazing jobs that she has. So either way, it's going to be really cool working on Moons Out, Brooms Out. Now, the next thing that I'm keen to do, and this will be the first time that I've actually done this, is at the JK Stitching Retreat when I purchased some fabric. It also came with some mystery fabric or some free fabric that I know that JK Stitching suppliers, they needed to perhaps get rid of the fabric because it just wasn't selling. Now, with the plan that I have, first of all, I'll show you the fabric. Now, it's a huge chunk of it. I'm not going to unfold it, but what this fabric is the Afghan kind of fabric, or if you're going to make an Afghan quilt or blanket, it has sections or squares that has what appears to be 14 count Aida and or 14 count fabric nonetheless. What I'm going to need to plan out a bit is how I'm going to stitch some of the smalls onto it, because what I want to do is stitch many of the smalls that we see in the Just Cross Stitching Halloween 2022 special and the smalls that are in the 2024 special. That I think would be really cool. And how I'm going to finish that blanket, I don't know exactly right now. That is a future thing I will worry about. What I am keen to do is just stitch many of the smalls that are here. And I do have a chart on the floor next to me that I will get very soon. I'm keen to incorporate some of the motifs that are in the chart that's on the floor into the Afghan quilt thing as well. That said, depending on the size of some of these motifs and whether or not they fit on the Afghan style of fabric, I'm actually keen. I actually forgot about this fabric for quite some time. I have this fabric that I've had in my stash for ages. I dyed this back in roughly 2019 when we were having all of those lockdowns, all that fun jazz happening. And it's got a couple of different pieces or finishes on this already. Now, the Kerglaff chart is actually from Bendy Stitchy that I purchased from her online, and this was one of my first uses of variegated thread that is cottage garden threads. So the Kerglaff and the words that are around the border are definitely stitched in cottage garden threads. The names of those threads, I can't remember the names, and I do still have the tags, but the tags have separated from the actual threads because, again, of my naivete with how those threads initially needed to be used and how they still need to be attached to those tags. This was a really fun stitch though. I really enjoyed doing this. And then the other piece that is on this fabric is called This Is Bullshit 2020. And this was stitched or was part of a free chart for the Mittagong Stitches Retreat that was held online. And it was held online because of border closures, all that life stuff that we know about, that we all very much disliked. Now, with this fabric, I actually dyed it myself, and I wanted to sort of play around with how all of it worked. This fabric, to the best of my understanding, is 28 count linen. I don't remember any other details from that in terms of the stitch count or anything like that. I had dyed this orange and then using some purple dye as well. I then tried to give it that moodiness and such, and I'm still amazed by how well this turned out. So this actually must have been dyed in 2020 instead, perhaps, roughly around the 2019-2020 year range anyway. So with all of this rambling in mind, I'm hoping to be able to maybe stitch something on this side, or whether it be one big piece, or if it's a whole heap of motifs that don't fit on the Afghan style quilt fabric. That is yet to be determined, and we'll wait and see. There's going to be a lot of fun and perhaps non-fun as well, because I'll be like, oh, so many decisions, so many options, and all that jazz. The other thing that I'm really keen to do as well is incorporate some of the variegated specialty threads that I purchased in the stitching retreat that I was part of a couple of weeks ago. First of which is this variegated thread from Weeks Dye Works, and it's called Trick or Treat. So fitting. So, to an extent, let's see if we can do a floss toss with this. To an extent, this could work okay, but there would be the risk of the oranges in this blending in too well with the fabric. Now, my initial thinking is that if I do stitch something on here, if it was just going to be the one piece, where we see on the cover page here, Nevermore, that maybe just as something different. But I also have that Nevermore piece tagged for some free fabric that I received from the stitching retreat. So I did mention in my very recent episode that Peggy had destashed some fabric, and I was the lucky recipient of that destash. So that's a little bit of where my brain is contemplating how things are. And based on this cover page and the finish of Nevermore, I'm thinking that it may be better for me to stitch Nevermore on free fabric that I received, because I know that fabric will be big enough for Nevermore. Whether or not I use this on Nevermore and the fabric that I received, yet to be determined, because I also have this. I also want to use this on one of the pieces. So it might mean that I use this or this on restitching the Black Cat's Quaker, because I am also super keen to get that finished either by the end of today, if not, actually by the end of today might be adventurous, at least trying to get the Black Cat sampler finished by the end of September. That might be a better goal for me to have a more realistic one. That is if I don't decide to throw the hands up in the air like I just don't care and go, look, I just want to stitch everything, because I'm also eyeing off this Brenda Bella threads, and this could actually look beautiful on this fabric. This, now that I'm looking at it through the camera, comparing it with the fabric, I definitely need to find a chart, and I have no doubt that I will, within the stash that I have, to use this thread on this fabric. Now this is called it's Brenda Bella Threads BT59, and I have had this thread in my stash for quite some time. To the best of my knowledge, I hope this is still available. I did buy this from I've got cottage gardens on my brain. I bought it from Crafty Frog in Canberra, so they do have a website that you'll be able to purchase things from. So hopefully they still have this in their stash and available, or there are some other stores that you may be able to buy it from. The other cool thing I just want to acknowledge is that Brenda Bella Threads is Australian, and more specifically Canberra based. Brenda Bella, just as a side note, there's a mountain range that is part of Canberra, and it is known as the Brenda Bella Mountains. And that is where we get a good portion of our cold temperature and cold weather from. And that's just a bit of a side note of why Brenda Bella Threads is special to me. Now, with all of those things in mind, I do have a heap of other specially variegated threads that I'd love to use, but may not be quite suited yet for the stitching that I want to do. Now, I'm just going to grab some more of the things that I'm keen to start working on, and we'll go through it a bit more. Okay, so Something Wicked 2, Banner and Biscornu by Sue Hills Designs is one of the charts that I had purchased at the JK Stitching Retreat a couple of weeks ago. And initially when I purchased this, it was my brain thinking, yes, anything spooky, Halloween themed, let's get it. Upon reflection, I'm umming and ahhing a bit about whether this was a wise decision in terms of whether I really wanted to stitch the banner and bisque or no. Upon further reflection and thinking and planning, this could still work out in my favour because I was thinking I could still stitch many of the motifs that I see, or we see rather, for the banner and the bisque or no as part of the Afghan quilt that I was talking about before, and using some of the small stitch or smalls from the 2022 Halloween themed magazine and even the 2024 magazine that I'm stitching the cat sampler Quaker from, because I was thinking, well, I could stitch it on the this fabric, or I could use one of the Paddock Lane Designs fabric that is called Turbulent. This is beautiful fabric, and I've surprisingly never stitched fabric from Paddock Lane Designs before. So this is going to be absolutely awesome either way, whichever way I end up doing this. This is 36 count fabric, and I'd most likely stitch 2/2 for this, or if it fully required it, 1/1. But this is where I'd start to question my eyesight and thinking I'd need glasses or some kind of magnification to help with this, or really good lighting. So this could work out beautifully. The the next thing that I'll be wanting to stitch, and this isn't necessarily Halloween themed or spooky themed, but it is me just wanting to start all of the things. And as part of the stitching retreat, there were some free charts that we received, and a couple of which are Country Threads charts. So with the charts, I can't show them because even though I received them as free, there aren't any cover pages to go with them. One of them is a paw print. The other one is a leaf from what makes me think of a tropical plant. I'm being super vague because I don't know how else to best describe it. Then there would also be the likes of a sampler to an extent in terms of stitching an alphabet and then figuring out what border could be done. But the idea would be to use a couple of the silks that I purchased. So one of which was the Water Lilies by Karen. This one's called Guacamole. And again, guacamole could also be used for any of the spooky stitching, and it could actually be quite complementary to this fabric here, as could this one, which is a Dinky Dyes hand-dyed silk, and it's called Vintage Plum. Again, both could look beautiful on this fabric, and I could use these two colours for some of the motifs that we see on the Something Wicked 2 banner and Bisque. So many options, so many combinations, so many variations. I'm looking forward to it. The next plan, thoughts of what I want to stitch, all the rest that isn't necessarily spooky stitching, but wanting to start all of the things, is a free chart that I got at the retreat called Koala Asleep in Gum Leaves by Carol Nielsen. And the fabric I am keen to stitch this one on is another Paddock Lane Designs, and this one is called Eucalypt Forest, and it's 36 count. I think it would just be so complimentary. I'd most likely use the called for colours for this particular one just to do it justice. Actually, this wasn't, I take it back. Initially, I said that this was a free chart, but I should look a lot more closely. This one I actually purchased, and it's again, this one is super cool. It'll be awesome. This one could actually even be one that I stitch in January, where I've got some plans to stitch things all Aussie themed. And I'm keeping this in a project bag that I purchased from the Stitching Retreat. I think this is so cool. This is awesome. Now, the next one that I'm actually really keen to start on, and this one isn't a spooky themed one, but what I love are the colors that are in this. And again, the closest thing that I'll ever get to a sampler that isn't a Quaker. This is one that I purchased, and it's called Patient Stitcher. And I've got fabric or threads rather that's covering up who the designer is. So it's by Tempting Tangles Designs, and this is the chart, and these are the threads that I think will be beautiful to go with it. Actually, be as close to the chart as possible. So these are the three that I've purchased, and I had thought that maybe this is the free fabric that, or destashed fabric that I received that could go beautifully with this. If I don't use this 18 count free fabric that was a destash, then this is what Nevermore could be stitched on. That is here from the magazine. So options and ideas are always awesome, and this is what I'm just keen to work on. The next one that I'm keen to start, and this is probably going to then spark my interest and desire to stitch another quilt or stitch projects for another quilt. That will take me yet another 10 years to do. But the pattern or the chart that is sparking all of this is called Bushman's Alarm. I'm going to need to open this up just to properly show you all the things, because I put fabric in with the chart just so I don't lose it and forget what my thoughts and ideas are. And the chart is, Bushman's Alarm, known as the Kookaburra. And what has inspired me for the fabric choice is someone had finished and brought into the retreat a Kookaburra they had stitched. It might even be Bushman's Alarm by Country Threads. And they had finished it on fabric very similar to this. Again, this is another Paddock Lane Designs fabric. This one is 18 count Ada, and it's called Dark Sky, which I think would be so complimentary for Bushman's Alarm. And I'm 90% certain that Bushman's Alarm will fit on this, and especially with it being an 18 count fabric, and the chart is usually for a 14 count fabric. So I think I'm pretty safe with that. I think that'll be absolutely awesome. And one of the things that I did learn when I had last made a quilt was the importance of things being relatively square and relatively the same size, because it made the world of difference with being able to then piece it together. Whether or not I remember that guidance and advice from previous learnings, we'll have to wait and see. Now, the next one that I really want to start, and this is where it is so uncomfortable at times, going through doing these things and looking at all the things of what I want to start. Now, a while ago, I had won a gift voucher to use at the 123 Stitch store based in America. The gift voucher I had received was from the Winter and Stars Hollow Stitching Retreat hosted by the Black Needle Society. And as part of that purchase using the gift voucher, I had purchased the strawberry square chart by Ink Circles. And with the fabric that I had purchased at the JK Stitching Retreat, I had purchased this 32 count fabric, and I can't remember if the fabric was called burgundy or something very similar to that, but I think it would just be so complimentary and beautiful for the strawberry square that I think the challenge that I'll have is figuring out what light coloured variegated thread I could use with it. I've got some ideas and thoughts in mind based on my current stash. I'm inclined to want to use cottage garden threads for that, partly because I just absolutely love their threads. Can't speak highly enough of them. We'll wait and see. The next one that I am keen to start but not in a rush to start is a chart that I purchased again at the retreat. It's called Old City Street by X squared cross stitch or cross squared cross stitch. So this is roughly what the project would look like when it's done. And the idea is that I could use the 28 count linen that I purchased a while ago from the Crafty Frog. I'm feeling unsure about the fabric choice, just knowing that this linen is the similar linen that I've used for, or tried to use for a couple of other charts where I've gone, or grumbled about it. So I'll have to wait and see. But the idea for Old City Street is that I would stitch it 2/2 because that would hopefully make my life just a little bit easier for the linen that's a bit uncomfortable. Now this next one, this one, I love this chart. I fell in love with it that I had to buy it twice. One for me and one for a friend. And this friend, if she's watching, knows that she's receiving it. So it's no fuss at all. So the chart is called Watercolor Seahorse by Cross Squared or X Squared Cross Stitch. That's the chart. Those colours. I need to finish some other rainbow themed projects before I can start this, but I'll probably start it before that. So I'm thinking that I would actually stitch this on 28 count peach fabric that again I purchased at the stitching retreat from a couple of weeks ago, and that's the peach fabric. I would most likely stitch this 2/2 on the 32 count fabric. I think the colours just would pop so beautifully on the peach fabric. I'm looking forward to starting that one. Now, this next one I'm looking forward to working on again will probably be a January one. It is the purchase of Aussie Heart by Carol Nielsen, which is this, and I'm aiming to stitch this on 28 count green linen. Yes, linen, I think. Yes, linen. So that would be the fabric, and I think it would just complement the koala so beautifully. I would most likely stitch this 2/2 because the cover page has given me the impression that this would be, or the model would have been stitched on 14 count Ada. This one I think is just awesome, and I'll have heaps of fabric left over as well. So there'll be heaps of other projects that, I mean, this one could the green fabric could even go beautifully with the seahorse. So many options, so many ideas. Now, I had sort of mentioned about quilts and those sorts of things because I've also got heaps of other cottage garden threads in the brain, heaps of other country threads charts that I eventually want to work on and start and all the rest. But when I purchased the Taylor Mouse by Cross Squared Cross Stitch or X Squared Cross Stitch, this immediately reminded me of a couple of charts that I have had in my stash for a long time, and I keep meaning to actually do something with them, but I haven't done anything with them yet. So this one is giving me Beatrix Potter vibes, and to help put into perspective, this is one of the charts that I've had in my stash for what feels like donkey's years. I just haven't done anything with it. And initially, if I didn't stitch this as is and I just stitched the motifs, if I've got leftover fabric for the Afghan quilt, these could be stitched on the Afghan quilt. That's where my headspace is going a bit. And if I did want this to be stitched for a baby's quilt or something like that, if I was ever inclined to do something like that, that's where the words could be stitched on the Afghan quilt as well. And I do have a couple of other charts sitting behind this one that I won't open, but is similar to the storybook sample, where I think it's the other two are to do with colours and numbers. Now, the next one that I don't have any fabric assigned to, but because I'm going to have leftover fabric from other stitching and such, it'll be no fuss. So this was one of the free charts that I got from the stitching retreat, and it's called To Stitch by Carol Nielsen. I'm thinking this one would work beautifully on that green fabric that I was thinking of for a similar chart by Carol Nielsen. And again, a similar thing for JK's bookmark for the stitching retreat, but this is actually a kit. So it's already got the fabric and the threads that we need with it. And again, if I wanted to even restitch this eventually, but without JKs in 2024, that could still be just beautiful, could be awesome. And last but not least, one of the ones that I am keen to start, will probably delay the starting of, is Purple Butterfly Heart Smooth. Again, by Cross Squared or X Squared Cross Stitch, and actually a digital version of a very similar chart to this purple heart. The difference is that the digital version that I have also has strings hanging down from it, and it's got ornaments, so to speak, or other butterflies and hearts and similar things that are hanging off it. So that's what makes this one smooth, and I guess the other one would be rough or chunky. I'm not quite sure. I haven't checked the proper chart for the exact wording on that one. So that's a bit of where my headspace is at and the plans that I've got for October and potentially well into November. And November could be November new starts, or the other phrasing could be November no new starts. That's too wordy though. So this is pretty much the end of this episode. It is a very long one, so thank you all so much for sticking around with me and having a look at what I've actually worked on and my plans heading forward into October, and how I'm going to finish off September. I hope that you're all having a lot of fun with your own spooky themed stitching, if that is your jam, or any other stitching that is filling your cup. I hope you're enjoying all of the projects that you are working on, and I look forward to catching up with you very soon. And before I fully sign off, if you have made it to the end of this episode and you like what you see and you like to see more of this kind of content, please make sure you like, subscribe, and ring the bell to make sure you receive any future notifications for all episodes and clips and such that I release. Until next time, happy stitching.